Okay, so picture this. It's 1971. We're in Tokyo. And Bruce Lee, the man himself, steps into this legendary dojo, a place with like 200 years of history practically soaked into the walls. We're talking blood, discipline, the whole deal. And the air is just thick with tension. Before he even gets his bearings, he's met by the stare of one of Japan's most feared martial arts masters. What happens next? Well, it isn't really a fight. It's something way, way more interesting.
And boom, with just those words, the gauntlet is thrown down. Master Koyoshita makes it crystal clear. This isn't some movie set. This is a sacred space. That opening line just cuts right through the air, you know? It sets the stakes immediately. This is a clash of worlds, and she is the absolute, unquestioned gatekeeper.
So you gotta ask yourself, why was Bruce Lee even here? I mean, he was a global superstar at this point, 31 years old. Turns out he was on a 2-week research trip. He wasn't there to film, he wasn't there to promote a movie, he was there to study, to prepare for what would become his masterpiece, Enter the Dragon. He came not to show off, but to genuinely understand the deep, core philosophy of Japanese martial arts. He came to be a student.
And the place he chose? Yeah, this was no tourist trap. The Yoshida Dojo was basically a fortress of tradition. It was dedicated to one thing and one thing only: kenjutsu, the ancient, brutal battlefield art of the sword. For over 200 years, this was a place of pure, uncut discipline, totally closed off to the public. Bruce Lee was literally stepping into living history. And at the very heart of this fortress was Master Koyoshita. Now get this, she was 44 years old and had been training in kenjutsu since she was 3. That is 41 straight years of uncompromising, non-stop practice. She had personally challenged and defeated every single male sensei who ever dared to question her authority. She had never, ever lost.
So after watching her students go through their forms, Koyoshikaya turns her attention to Bruce. The room goes dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. And her voice, it's just controlled, firm, totally devoid of emotion as she gives her verdict.
And there it is. Oof, that's not just a comment, right? That is a precision-guided missile of an insult. It was a test designed to poke his ego right in front of her 20 students. She's basically dismissing his entire life's work as a performance. The whole dojo just holds its breath, waiting for the superstar to explode. But the explosion never comes, not even a spark. Bruce Lee's expression, it stays completely calm, almost serene, and totally attentive. He gets it. He understands that in this world, in this room, respect isn't something you can demand, it has to be demonstrated. And his response, well, it would change everything.
Just one simple idea: learn. In that room, at that exact moment, it was the single most powerful thing he could have said. He didn't get defensive, he didn't argue, he showed humility. And that just completely flips the script. It shatters Koyoshita's expectations and shifts the entire dynamic of the encounter.
So what follows is this brilliant little back and forth. Koyoshita kind of pushes back, asking if a famous guy like him can even handle being corrected. But Bruce, he just deftly turns it right back around. He asks if she, the master, is also willing to be corrected. So it's not a test of ego anymore, it's suddenly a mutual challenge, a challenge of who is truly open to learning.
And her response is just fantastic. You can feel the shift. There's no anger, no offense in her voice, the dismissal is gone. What's left is this genuine, almost scientific curiosity. For the first time in over 2 decades, someone has challenged her, not with force, but with an idea. And she's intrigued. So after watching her flawless, perfect sword forms, Bruce doesn't propose a fight, he proposes an experiment. He makes this incredibly deep observation. Her perfection is designed for an opponent who plays by the rules, who is predictable. And right there, in that perfection, he sees its own limitation. Okay, let's break down what happens next. It's unbelievably fast. Koyoshita attacks with lightning speed. First, a big horizontal cut. Bruce doesn't back up. He moves into it, at an angle. The sword just slices empty air. Next, she thrusts straight for him. He doesn't block, he uses the lightest touch on her wrist to just nudge her force in another direction. And then, her most powerful strike, an overhead chop, comes down. And Bruce is simply not there anymore. A tiny little sidestep is all it took. And the result is just stunning. 10 seconds, 3 powerful attacks. Bruce Lee used 0 force. He was never touched, not once.
He didn't even try to counterattack. He just evaded, redirected, and flowed with her energy. And the dojo is left in absolute jaw-on-the-floor silence. They had just witnessed the impossible.
So in this silence after, Koyoshita looks from her sword on the floor to her own hands and then up at Bruce. And for the first time in probably decades, her face shows pure, unadulterated surprise. You can see her processing what just happened, realizing her own force was completely turned against her.
And this is Bruce Lee's only explanation. It's not just a cool line, it's a whole philosophy in a sentence. It's the key that unlocks the entire encounter. He wasn't a bigger, stronger rock, he was water. And that one idea, that one metaphor, was about to change everything for Master Koyoshita.
What Koyoshita does next is nothing short of historic. In her own dojo, in front of all of her students, she respectfully places her sword on the floor, and then she sits down before Bruce Lee in the formal posture of a student ready to receive a lesson. It was an act of humility so profound, so powerful, that her disciples would talk about it for the rest of their lives. Their conversation then turned to this concept called Ma, which was the absolute core of her school's teaching. It's a Japanese word for the invisible space between things. She explained that the real weapon isn't the sword, it's the control of that empty space, the mastery of distance, timing, and intention.
And this is where it all just clicks into place. Bruce immediately gets it. He realizes that Ma is the exact same principle as his own philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. Controlling the space, intercepting intention, adapting without a fixed style, they had both arrived at the exact same universal truth, just from completely different traditions. So what began as this tense challenge completely transformed into a 2-week collaboration. It's incredible. Every single morning, Bruce returned to the dojo. They trained together. They shared knowledge. She taught him the fundamentals of the sword. He showed her how those very same principles could be applied to empty hand movement.
And the impact of this meeting was deep and lasting. Koyoshita started teaching the principles behind the techniques, not just the memorized forms. On Bruce's last day, she gave him her own personal training sword, one she'd used for 30 years and had it engraved with "Truth has no style," the very heart of Jeet Kune Do. Years later, watching Enter the Dragon, she saw her own school's philosophy in his movements. And after he passed away, she held a memorial, honoring him as a true master who understood their tradition. This is how Koyoshita started explaining her new approach to her students. The form, the technique, that's just the finger pointing the way. The truth, the principle, that's the moon. Bruce had helped her and her students see beyond the finger. So the real takeaway from this whole story, it isn't about who was better or who won. It's a powerful lesson in humility. Bruce came there to learn, not to prove anything. And Koyoshita, instead of just rigidly defending her tradition, chose to be curious, chose to listen. And that mutual respect is what makes this encounter truly legendary.
Which really just leaves us with this final thought. True mastery isn't about conquering everyone around you. It's about having the willingness to keep learning, especially when you're already at the top of your game. The rock stands proud and firm, but it's the water that always finds a way. So the question for you is, where in your life can you stop being the rock and start being the water?